The Day Billy Fell Off the Cliff by Byron Broussard. The Day Billy Fell Off the Cliff, Part 24. Ellipses, Voice from Outside. A voice from outside here again. I just wanted to let you know about something to do with time and timing and how a good book is put together. I guess I'm supposed to relay my position again. Lame. My frequency is in the multiverse, my time is beyond, and my location is outside. Also known as my intuition being awareness, my body being the royal you, and my surroundings being nothing. Remember that? I didn't. Anyway, I am here at this point to write the beginning of the book. Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. This here is to reinforce continuity. No rewrites. Just because I realized that this book needed a preface doesn't mean that the preface is a rewrite. Honestly, I don't know what to write to properly introduce this. I know it's got to be something that's not in my voice. Maybe the author's voice could do it. Hi guys. This book is a lot. It's not for the faint of mind. At this point in writing the book, I have come up with at least 4 different endings. I will try my hardest to bring this to satisfaction whilst also touching upon all possibilities. You have my word. From me, Byron. There. I think that should suffice. Such a trustworthy and compassionate voice. Anyway, shit's about to go down. Let's get back to Billy in the darkness of self-reflection. I watched as Billy's darkness of self-reflection turned into beams of colorful light. Billy and Jessica sat across from each other in a flaming booth inside the flaming coffee shop. The coffee shop sat in stretches of darkness, but from inside, shadows of outdoor scenes could be seen through the dark windows. Welcome, me greeted in a toneless voice from next to Jessica. The 3 wise men were standing next to the booth looking around in wonder. This is the famous flaming coffee shop. You should be honored to be here. Especially since we've decided to annex the whole imagination deal, Billy said, not making eye contact with Jessica. That word may not have meant what you think it does, me answered. Billy stood up and walked to the 3 wise men with arms open. Annex, sublet, liquidate, she did it all. Because time, she says. Condemned it to hell for the waste of time. And time doesn't even pass here. He hugged the wise men. Jessica sipped a coffee. What are we doing here? George asked, stepping away from Billy. He took a booth across from Jessica and me sitting down in a huff. Coffee, anyone? Me asked. A tray of coffee appeared in their Vantablack hands, and they stood and gestured. Taylor took one and stepped back to where he was frozen to. We're wasting time, Jessica said. She looked at each of their faces, searching for eye contact. Literally and figuratively, she added. Billy turned from Taylor and Frank to face Jessica. When's the last time you seen a movie? There was a pause as everyone contemplated how much of a joke that question was. Taylor, George, Frank, Jessica, me, all of you get ready to have your minds blown. A television appeared over the bar on the far side of the flaming coffee shop. They all turned to face the screen. It's on fire and it's big. Prophetic Productions appeared on the blank screen in white font. A screenplay by Billy, Jessica, and me. The sound of the star came from the television and filled the flaming coffee shop. I sat back in amazement. It seems almost as if the technology I use to see them is the same technology used in the television. A picture in picture over the fire of their actions. The video showed the landscape of the flaming land and swung high over the tops of the flaming cottages before zooming in on Billy and Jessica standing next to me. Me waved on the television while looking back and waving at the group in the coffee shop. Wicked weird, me, Billy said, feeling amazed at his own work. The more you know, Billy on screen said. He pointed his flaming finger at the viewers. This is a short production of what could and should happen, but ultimately may never really need to happen, and why you shouldn't feel bad about it. Billy on screen put his hand down and looked at Jessica on screen's counterpart. Billy on screen put his hand down and looked at Jessica's on-screen counterpart. This shouldn't take long. You need to free yourselves. And wouldn't you know that my teacher can condense information? Jessica on screen flipped an open hand upwards towards Billy in the flaming coffee shop. Oops, I meant this one. She pointed to the accurate Billy. You might be trying too hard? Billy asked Jessica. He slid into the booth and picked up a coffee. The two standing wise men also took their seats. This is awesome, Taylor said. No, this is trying too hard, Me said in a toneless voice. They stepped towards the television while the video version of them stepped closer to the screen. The way Me moved made it look like the television was a mirror. Billy on screen laughed. Jessica sat down in a flaming booth chair that appeared as her butt stopped moving. What the fuck? Jessica in the coffee shop said. Me waved to themselves a few feet from the screen before climbing onto the bar. The flaming coffee shop seemed to lose a dimension as Me touched the screen. Perpendicular lights collided into points and round photons as Me crossed the screen. Then the missing dimension returned to the flaming coffee shop. Me was in the video, along with other Billy, Jessica, and other Me. On screen, Billy looked bewildered as Me danced with themselves, spinning in circles on the coals. What is this supposed to teach us again? Frank asked. Billy in the coffee shop answered. The video Me stopped dancing and the other video Me stretched out their arms. I'll show you from here, Me answered. The screen went black. You all want wishes. The screen displayed cartoon images of Taylor, George, and Frank in succession getting gift boxes and opening them. Some of those gifts would never really happen. The screen displayed the cartoon George with the gift that says Lisa's hand. The gift was promptly crossed out while a buzzer sounded. Not gonna happen, Me said. Some gifts are inconsequential, Me continued. The screen showed Taylor opening his gift on the right side of the screen, and the left side showed Taylor setting his gift down on the flaming coals where it turned to ashes. No difference, Me reported. The screen showed Frank opening his gifts and his eyes burning out of their sockets to the right of the screen, and the left of the screen showed Frank putting his gifts on the coals where it turned to ashes. No difference, Me reported. Rude, Taylor said. He sipped at his coffee. Of course, because the facts fall the way they do, doesn't mean that's what we will choose to believe, Billy said as a voiceover. We understand how the human will can transform the hardest of facts into opinion, he continued. The screen showed George with his gift crossed out, holding it up and looking at it from different angles. The cartoon George pulled the cross off the gift and dusted it off. The screen crossed itself while a loud buzzer sounded. While we understand feelings, we also know that we can save energy through understanding. Any questions? Me finished. The screen showed a few flaming cottages on the coals. The fire danced as background music played softly. Where do I sign up? Taylor asked. The screen blinked and displayed a different configuration of cottages. You can hang out with us if you want, Billy answered as a voiceover. Lisa and Rick could have hung out with us as well. I'm kind of surprised we aren't more popular around here. The background music played on. Jessica looked at Billy knowingly. Well, since we are all here, why shouldn't I partner with Lisa? George asked the screen. The video blinked as a new configuration of cottages appeared. The path of most resistance and why, Jessica's voice said from the screen. Momentum and inertia. The screen displayed a half-pipe with a wheel rolling like a pendulum from one side to the other. George, your momentum is towards an object at rest. And from Lisa's perspective, picking you up to speed would be much like tying her momentum to an object at rest. The screen showed the wheel crashing into a wall that appeared at the bottom of the half pipe, then showed the pendulum renewed before showing the wheel rolling from the right with a rope attached to the right wall. The wheel got to the bottom of the half pipe before being pulled and stopped in place. "This is the path of most resistance," Jessica said in a voiceover. A new configuration of flaming cottages appeared on the screen, and the background music played on. "So," Frank said, "true clarity is that in order to matter to anyone that matters, one would have to defeat you." The screen blinked. "Or," Frank added, with his fingers to his lips, "one would have to recognize the threshold you occupy in order to be a peer of your subordinates," he finished. The screen went blank, and the music stopped. "Well," Billy started to answer. He stepped out of the booth and opened the side of the coffee shop into the darkness. The others looked on, and me stepped out from the television. "Was that necessary?" Jessica asked me, giggling. Me shook their head, Vantablack curls bouncing. "Well, that sounds flowery and is fine conclusion to come to, considering what you know. But what you don't know is that I didn't go around challenging who I thought was the strongest flaming person here," Billy answered. "My so-called power came from exploration. You can challenge me here, though. It may help you grasp something or other." Billy stepped into the darkness, beckoning the wise men to approach. Billy continued his walk until he was hardly visible to the rest of them in the flaming coffee shop. George followed first, then Taylor went right after. I watched Frank look to Jessica for guidance. She shrugged and grabbed me, to which Frank responded by following out the door. "We will watch from over here," me reported. The flames grew brighter as the light displayed moved like liquid crystal. The three wise men formed a sort of circle around Billy in the pitch-black darkness. "You don't have too much fun out there, Billy," Jessica warned. "You know me," Billy answered. "Now how's about a little bonus lesson, the mechanics..." "You know me," Billy answered. "Now how's about a little bonus lesson, the mechanics to level the playing field?" Billy turned to each of them as he spoke. "Thinking is private. Talking out loud is audible thinking. The will is what moves you, so move in mysterious ways." He stopped spinning and got into a stance. "Oh, and some thoughts can bring pain, so watch what it is you believe." I watched in awe as Billy vanished from where he was and appeared in front of all three of the wise men at the same time. He reached his hand out and touched their frozen faces in the same time as himself elsewhere. "Boop," he said. "Oh, bravo," me said in a toneless voice as three Billies vanished and reappeared in the middle of the wise men as one Billy. They all reacted differently. Taylor disappeared from view. George fell to his butt. Frank had stepped back with a late dodge and an ashamed look on his face. By the time Billy was back in the middle of them, Frank had a flaming sword in his hands. "Think twice about charging in," Billy said from behind and in front of him. Frank waved his sword to twist it downward before plunging it behind himself and back around to the front in a skillful arc. "Wow, yeah, fight that air, bro," Billy cheered. By this time, Taylor moved to the side of George. They both had out their swords. I am fairly sure that what I saw next can only be described by Billy in the act. Now the bonus lesson continues. Open your mind to your will, and you will fly. Once in a flow state with the will, curate the mind and fine-tune the resulting actions. A small tower or whatnot appeared in front of them with an apple on it. I think I want to cut the apple, and so I opened my mind to my will. The single image of Billy in front of the chest-high apple began to distort itself into mini apples in front of and around Billy. Fine-tune with the mind so that I move with my will in flight. Billy began to step towards where the original apple was, whilst the apples around him condensed back into the single chest-high one. Billy's sword swipe was instantaneous, while seeming to leave an after-image echo. Then the apple exploded. "Then you fly," Billy said. Ellipses, Billy. So here we were in the middle of darkness of self-reflection. And I'm over here trying to get these buffoons to step into their comfort zones. I mean, I figure they would each be more comfortable if it was their darkness versus respectively. So I showed my hand first. Use your will as the vehicle and your thoughts as the aim, and the thoughts as the trigger, and the will to curate the thoughts detrimental, I says to them. Very clear directions. I cut the apple that exploded. It was the coolest thing since the orgasm button. These three fools looking at me like I just finished a lecture on rocket science. Frank had promised, but not enough of balance to grasp. Frank had promised, but not enough of a balanced grasp to even pretend to attack. Should we just call it here, boys? I asked from in front of each of them. Separating myself was so cool. It was like I was the apple before the cut. I simply willed to be in front of them without thinking about how far apart they were, then moved to my will with the speed of me consistently while I spoke my message. When releasing the will to be in front of them, I became one again where I started. If I can get you standing and fighting, I can really sharpen my repertoire. Ellipses, I. Jessica and me remained unmanifested to give Billy and the three wise men the floor. They spoke to each other in whispers that could only be heard by them and Billy if he made himself aware. Is it over? Jessica asked, sounding hopeful. No, it feels like he's going to attempt to teach them, me answered. Billy manifested a sword in his hands and some land beneath them. The grasp was ankle high, but the flames that drifted on the blade tips went up to their knees. The translucent flames danced together as if breezes were blowing towards Billy. I passed condensed knowledge to you earlier when I booped you, Billy said to them. Oh wow, the grass is a nice touch, Jessica said. Should help this move along. I was getting ready to step in the name of science. More like in the name of efficiency, me said with a toneless laugh. You should pretty much get how I did what I did earlier by now, Billy encouraged the three wise men. Taylor stepped towards Billy on the flaming field, his view twisted as the darkness of self-reflection reacted to his unleashed will. Now we are talking, Billy said. His view shifted to see a swirling funnel of images in front of him. Billy willed a sidestep that appeared as Taylor's view on top one side of the light. Alright. Taylor stepped towards Billy on the flaming field. His view twisted as the darkness of self-reflection reacted to his unleashed will. Now we are talking, Billy said. His view shifted to see a swirling funnel of images in front of him. Billy willed a sidestep that appeared as Taylor's view on one side of the light, split by a white line where Billy's view began. I watched as Taylor's view quickly shrunk. Billy lifted an empty hand as the swirling images began to slow. When Taylor's side was whipped off the display, Billy's view was covering the display. Billy stood on the flaming grass with an empty hand in the air. The darkness of self-reflection opened so that Billy, George, and Frank were all visible on the flaming grass. Billy skillfully dropped his open hand whilst bringing up his sword. Taylor's sword crashed into Billy's sword as Taylor appeared in front of Billy in mid-swing. Billy crouched to the ground before exploding to the right. He flew a few meters until Taylor appeared in his path with his sword in another downstroke. Upon seeing Taylor, Billy was assaulted with images that surrounded him of Taylor in different styles of mid-swing. Billy attempted to only block the first swing in defiance of the projected images. That first Taylor was knocked back in an open guard as the other images continued to swing. "Ah, shit," Billy said. 3 swords in different times, whilst in the same time made solid cuts before Billy jumped in the opposite direction to Taylor while throwing his sword at him. Before Billy jumped in the opposite direction to Taylor while throwing his sword at him. The display registered the event as separate images like the apple that condensed upon Billy as he jumped away. "That was sloppy and a well-learned lesson," Jessica whispered to me. "I gotta waste time thinking about how that shouldn't hurt. Best go quantum against quantum," Billy said while he reclaimed his time. Taylor caught the sword, and a new swirl of images were sweeping the flaming field towards Billy. George and Frank stepped to the side as the display began to react to the unleashed will of Billy and Taylor. Billy's view split from Taylor's view by a white line. Taylor's spiral reached out towards Billy's, whilst Billy's spiral followed behind him, fanning out. The view on the display looked as if the spiral and Billy headed towards the white line in the middle of them. As they neared the white line, became more defined. Billy stepped to the white line face first, while his swirl of images flowed strongly behind him. When Taylor's swirling images reached the white line, they unraveled into tiny separate boxes inside the white line. There was one Taylor to a box and a Billy that stepped to him face first in every box. "What is happening right now?" Jessica asked me in a whisper. "It looks like I'm cross-eyed and drunk out there right now. I can't even see George nor Frank." She was silent for a moment. "And is the grass glitching?" Jessica and me shared a laugh. "I think Billy and Taylor are expressing their wills in a manner that Billy might describe as unleashed," me answered. One side is the viewpoint of Billy and his will, and the other side is the other. Taylor's looks like a mess because, like with the apple, he seems to be projecting dominance and accurate cuts, whereas Billy seems to be going with a cleaner will of something that I would assume to be arrogance." Me laughed. I watched in amazement as Billy answered Taylor's many different projections with uniqueness in each box. Ellipses, Billy: "Yo, this shit was wild, yo." Taylor the homie came up to me with this whole will unleashed trying to cut me or some shit. I stepped right up to his head-splitting projections, willing confidence and skill. No fear Shakespeare, as they say. Then there was this white light between us, like Taylor was shining brighter than fire, but the light was like images that couldn't be seen. They all got to me before he was even in sword's distance. I had to literally and figuratively fight through a friggin' blizzard of Taylor before I could even get to Taylor. When you are in the big lights and the crowd is 1,000 flaming ninjas with bad intentions, can you still put out the A game? That is a question not many people know the personal answer to. I put on some Kanye shades and followed my blind confidence to its natural conclusion. At a certain point, I realized being blinded by strange, harmful light full of projected attacks was not all that bad. I just had to keep my will set on blind confidence. But even so, by the time I finally reached Taylor, I had started to send well wishes to the blinding lights. "Thank you for coming out. I know you all want a slice, but I'ma just give you a tickle instead," is what I said to the lights. It was almost awkward. I don't think Taylor heard me. When I finally got to him, I stepped inside his guard, or swing rather, and lifted him in an embrace before throwing him to the ground. He rolled through the flaming field for yards. So surprised. "You know, I doubt anyone has lended this much of their minds to the people they carry with them. Ellipses, I. Oh shit, did I say that out loud? Oh shit, did I say that aloud? Billy swore. Pretentious much? Jessica called off. Oh shit, did I say that aloud? Billy swore. Pretentious much? Jessica called from off display. How the fuck? Did you dodge all of those? Taylor asked from the ground. How the fuck did you dodge all of those? Taylor asked from the ground. He used simplicity against complexity, me answered. Thanks, cheerleaders, Billy grumbled. Whose side are you on anyway? Huh, George? Frank? George scratched his head. Can Lisa do this? He asked. We make it up as we go here, bitch. I highly doubt she can do that yet, Billy answered. He appeared in front of Frank, who stood next to George. Sit this one out for a while, Taylor. You're cool. Billy stepped between the two men. You have unresolved issues. Put your will to the test and know what to do when you leave here. No more questions. Billy looked up and winked. Me gave an audible laugh. Yeah. Keep pushing your luck, Jessica answered. The two men looked at each other and through Billy. Frank nodded to George. I think I get it now, Frank said. He stepped back as images grew in a swirl behind him. Oh shit, look out for this one, Billy said. You get what? George asked. You can overpower me, but can you possibly overpower each of my own projected selves as well? Frank stepped back, and the images swirled with exponentially more fervor. How does that apply to me? What am I supposed to will? George asked. Like, the type of man Lisa would go for? George's view began to twist. Yeah, that must be it. Oh boy, you guys remember? I stand in the way of your very will. What can we do about it? Billy asked. He stepped from between the two men and walked further down the flaming field. Billy's images swirled behind him like they did when he fought Taylor, as did Frank's images. George's images twisted his own view, making the white border line appear in the display once again. One side of the white line was a swirling madness of images, while the other side was Billy and Frank on the flaming field. The white line began to fill with thousands of tiny boxes of George that Billy was slowly but surely being added to, unbeknownst to Billy. In that moment, I was able to catalog most every box of images that arose. In the beginning of Taylor's image assault on Billy, Billy would always appear face first in front of Taylor and Billy would always appear face first in front of Taylor and assess the momentum before reacting. His early reactions were parry, push, more often than not. Then towards the middle of the assault, Billy began to enter the boxes face first, greet Taylor, and then submit him in an embrace that usually was only one arm strong. Towards the end of the assault of images, Billy began to be seen entering the boxes face first, but with fervor. He would enter and wrap around Taylor as if he were the one who made the projection. Then he would give Taylor a gift that was not always, but mostly, the golden goblet. The mad swirl of images that now approached the white line and boxes were all around different in many ways. The boxes of images were wildly different. Some were set in Lisa's darkness of self-reflection, while others were set in the flaming lands themselves. Very few of the mad swirls had anything to do with their present moment. Billy was beginning to be thrown into a swirl of George's relationship daydreams. Ellipses, Billy. So on goes the light again, and I genuinely want to help George out. He seems to be caught up on changing his character. I got mad respect for character development. I willed ruthlessness and efficiency as an overlay as I stepped to Frank. I could feel some type of Tao flow state coming from Frank's new clarity. He just stood there with his sword held properly, with a mad twist of images flowing out of him. I figured my flow of images was a little less cool than his, but the ruthlessness and efficiency overlay compensated for my insecurity. "Oh, wow," I heard Jessica say, and I knew it was because his is bigger. He wanted to see someone get through all his projections, huh? A stamina test complements my overlay beautifully. "I think he heard you," Me said. "Oh shit, really? Don't mind us," Jessica said. "I'll take it as an apology." "I'll really be able to improve the orgasm button after this exercise," I shouted. The light got brighter. Me and What's-His-Face were in the light that now became somewhat of a circle, and this dude looked like he was pretty serious. I put my sword out to him as I reached to see what he would do, and he stepped into guard. I spun around and did a backswing, hoping he would catch the blade in a strange theatrical style, since the lights were up. His showtime was a bit different, though. He pushed me, and I ended up near the border of the light line. To remember the overlay, I jumped in front of whatever his name was and attempted to sweep the leg. Frank stabbed at me, like he was attempting to invoke actual swordplay. But that couldn't be what was happening. I threw him in his intense swirl of images outside of the circle and counted how long it would take for him to return. A fire began to burn inside of me, slight annoyance and disappointment that there was another puzzle on the loose. How to overcome and be ruthless and efficient. "It seems like bait," Me said. "Not to interrupt, but really though. Kinda strange to be so intense and also nonviolent," Jessica added. "He's trying to get me to fall for his tricks. I think I should have been more crass to that apple," I commented. "You must be concentrating so hard right now. We have been whispering to each other the whole time, but you just started to hear us," Jessica said. "So apparently the cheerleaders were gossiping. I hope they let me in on the commentary after this. I really want to know what it looked like when I went against Taylor." "This is no trick. You cannot defeat me," Frank said. He appeared out of the dark after what could have been 2 or 27 minutes. "I'm pretty sure you want me to step into one of your projections or something, kind of like I want to see how the ones behind me work," I told him. He promptly appeared next to me, and we both moved to the side at the same time. His sword fought to pierce my chest before I willed myself out of there. I appeared behind George and turned him towards where Frank stood. Frank was blinded, so I took George and moved him behind Frank. "You're both incapacitated. Now what?" I tried to ask, but they were too busy screaming in confusion. "It was fun while it lasted, chap." Ellipses. I. Billy clamped down on the wills of the two wise men and reappeared the flaming coffee shop. Taylor stood next to a booth with one hand on the tall chair. George and Frank were on top of each other, squirming to reorient themselves. "What the fuck?" George said many times. "We don't get to see how the projections work?" Frank spoke up. "Don't worry about it," Me said as they walked into the door with Jessica. "We got access to all information, new and old." "Yeah, just run a gosh dang simulation, guys," Billy said. "We didn't even have to unleash no wills, just pills." Sorry, Billy has gone mad. It's this damn darkness of self-reflection. Too stagnant for my Billy, Jessica said. She sat in the booth next to me and where Taylor stood watching. "You're welcome here, my boy." "You are welcome here, me boy," Billy said, clasping Taylor on the back. "One of the good ones." Billy turned to George. "You, on the other hand, I'm almost positive that you have not learned your lesson," Billy said. I knew the connection they were missing even before Me said, asked the question. So I reached out of the liquid crystal image that came out of the fire and I touched Me. I bridged the gap. I interacted. I am alive.